Hello and welcome back to Her Revenge Arc. My name is Alara, and I am your storyteller. Here we don't dwell on the fires of anger, but on the cold hard clarity that comes after the smoke has cleared. We explore the quiet architecture of justice, built brick by meticulous brick, not in the heat of a moment, but in the patient, calculating silence that follows a profound injustice. The stories we tell are not about screaming matches or grand, theatrical explosions. They are about the slow, deliberate turning of tables, the kind of revenge that is served not just cold, but with the chilling precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Today's story is my own. It is a story about worth, about how it is defined, who gets to define it, and what happens when their definition is proven devastatingly wrong. It begins, as so many of these stories do, in a place of manufactured mediocrity. A beige-walled office under the flat, unforgiving glare of fluorescent lights, a place where ambition often goes to die a quiet death. It begins with a single sentence, spoken with such casual cruelty that it became the cornerstone of a new reality I would build for myself. So find a comfortable place.
Pour yourself a drink.
Let the world outside fade away and listen. Let me tell you about Marcus Thorne and the day he told me I didn't deserve it. The air in the offices of Sterling Hayes Analytics always had a specific layered scent. It was a combination of industrial-strength carpet cleaner that fought a losing battle against the ghosts of microwaved lunches, the faint electric tang of overworked servers humming in a nearby closet, and the pervasive, slightly bitter aroma of coffee that had been sitting on a hot plate for far too long. To me, it was the smell of stagnation. It was the scent of a place that was functional but utterly devoid of inspiration. I was a senior data analyst. It's a title that sounds both important and impenetrably dull, and in many ways it was. My world was one of spreadsheets that stretched into infinity, of complex algorithms and predictive models. I found a strange, quiet beauty in it. To me, data wasn't just numbers. It was a story waiting to be told. It was the silent pulse of the company, the invisible currents that dictated profit and loss, success and failure. My job was to listen to that pulse, to translate its faint rhythmic whispers into a language that the executives could understand. The language of charts, graphs, and actionable insights. And I was very, very good at it. This wasn't arrogance. It was a simple, provable fact. I didn't just run the reports. I understood the why behind the numbers. I saw patterns others missed, connected dots that seemed impossibly distant. While my colleagues would present the what, I would dig deeper to unearth the so what. My reports were dense, detailed, but always ended with a clear, concise conclusion that often shifted the direction of a project or a marketing campaign. I was the quiet engine in the back room, the one whose work made others look brilliant in their PowerPoint presentations. And my boss, the man who curated and presented that brilliance as his own, was Marcus Thorne. Marcus was the director of the analytics department. He was a man built from a corporate template. He wore suits that were just a little too sharp. His hair always perfectly coiffed with a product that smelled aggressively of sandalwood. He walked with a confident, almost predatory stride, and he spoke in a booming baritone, peppering his speech with the kind of empty corporate jargon that made my teeth ache. He loved words like synergy, paradigm shift, and leveraging assets. He used them as a smokescreen, a cloud of impressive-sounding noise to mask a profound and almost terrifying lack of substance. Marcus didn't understand data. He didn't understand the intricate work my team and I did. He understood power. He understood perception. He knew how to stand in front of a board of directors, point to a graph that I had spent 80 hours creating and say, "As you can see from the deep dive my team and I conducted, we've identified a key growth vector." He was a phenomenal presenter. He could sell ice to a polar bear, and he was selling my work, our work, as a testament to his own genius. For a long time I let it go. I was not a confrontational person. I was raised to believe that good work was its own reward, that if you put your head down and delivered results, you would be recognized. I found satisfaction in solving the puzzle, in the elegant simplicity of a perfectly crafted algorithm. The credit was secondary. I told myself this over and over, a mantra to soothe the small, persistent sting of being overlooked. My life outside of work was modest. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment filled with more books than furniture. I was diligently paying off a mountain of student loan debt from a master's degree that had made me an expert in my field, but had left me financially tethered. My younger sister was just starting college, and our parents, who had sacrificed so much for my education, were struggling to help her. I sent money home every month, a quiet contribution that I never spoke of but which was a constant, pressing weight on my finances. A raise wasn't just about recognition for me, it was about breathing room. It was about easing the burden on my family. It was about the freedom to finally start building a life, not just servicing a debt. And so, I decided to ask. This decision wasn't made lightly. It was the culmination of a year of exceptional performance, capped off by a project that I had personally spearheaded. A project that had saved the company a quantifiable seven-figure sum. It was codenamed Project Nightingale. Project Nightingale was my masterpiece. The company was bleeding money in its logistics chain. Products were being misrouted, stored inefficiently, and shipped using outdated carrier agreements. It was a tangled mess of legacy systems and bad habits. Everyone knew it was a problem, but no one wanted to touch it. It was considered a career dead end. A Gordian knot that was impossible to untangle. Marcus had assigned it to the department with a dismissive wave of his hand in a team meeting, calling it a little housekeeping. No one wanted it. My colleagues visibly shrank in their seats. I saw not a mess but a massive complex data puzzle. I volunteered. Marcus had looked at me with a flicker of something, pity perhaps or amusement, and said, "Knock yourself out, Alara. Don't spend too much time on it." I spent the next 6 months on it. I lived and breathed logistics data. I worked through lunches, stayed late into the evenings, and spent weekends building a new model from the ground up. I didn't just analyze their existing data. I integrated new data streams: real-time shipping costs, warehouse temperature fluctuations, even weather patterns that affected delivery routes. I taught myself a new coding language to build a simulation that could test thousands of different logistical scenarios in a matter of hours. The result was a comprehensive 150-page report, complete with a new routing and storage protocol that was elegant, efficient, and most importantly, immediately implementable. I had found the story in the noise. I had untangled the knot. My conservative estimate, which I had triple-checked, was a cost saving of $1.2 million in the first year alone, with further savings in subsequent years. I presented it to Marcus in his office. He had skimmed the executive summary, his eyes glazing over as I tried to explain the methodology. He'd nodded, a slow, patronizing rhythm. "Good stuff, Alara. Very thorough. Leave it with me. I'll take it upstairs and see if we can get some traction on this." A week later, at the quarterly all-hands meeting, the CEO of Sterling Hayes stood on stage and announced a major new efficiency initiative, spearheaded by the brilliant, forward-thinking work of our own Marcus Thorne. Marcus had taken the stage, accepted the applause, and presented a sanitized 5-slide version of my work. He never mentioned my name. Not once. He referred to it as an achievement of my department. That was the moment the mantra broke. Good work was not its own reward. Not here. Not with him. The sting was no longer small and persistent. It was a raw, gaping wound. And it was in the shadow of that stolen glory that I began to prepare my request for a raise. I was meticulous. I spent 2 weeks assembling my case. I created a portfolio, a document that was as carefully constructed as any of my professional analyses. It detailed every project I had worked on for the past 3 years. For each one, I outlined my specific contributions, the challenges I had overcome, and wherever possible, the quantifiable results. I included testimonials I had quietly solicited from colleagues in other departments who had benefited from my work. The centerpiece, of course, was Project Nightingale. I didn't just include my final report. I included my process, my code, my simulations. It was an undeniable, exhaustive chronicle of my value. I researched salary benchmarks for my role, experience, and location. I knew the number I was going to ask for was fair. It was a 20% increase, a significant jump, but one that would bring me in line with industry standards and was more than justified by the $1.2 million I had just handed him on a silver platter. Finally, I requested a meeting. His assistant, a perpetually frazzled young woman named Chloe, squeezed me into his calendar for a 15-minute slot between his Synergy Summit and his executive power lunch. 15 minutes to make the case for my worth. The day of the meeting, I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. I wore my best blazer, a simple dark gray one that made me feel more solid, more professional. I rehearsed my opening lines in the sterile silence of the ladies' room, my own reflection looking back at me with wide, anxious eyes. Just state the facts, I told myself. The data doesn't lie. When the time came, I walked to his office at the end of the hall. It was the only one with a real wood door instead of glass. It felt like approaching a throne room. I knocked. "Come in," his voice boomed. Marcus's office was an extension of his personality. It was large and corner-windowed, with a view of the city that was meant to impress. The furniture was dark, heavy mahogany. On his wall, there were no pictures of family, only framed certificates and photos of him shaking hands with vaguely important-looking men. A large, ostentatious putting green was tucked into one corner. The room smelled of leather and sandalwood. He was on the phone, leaning back in his high-backed leather chair, one expensive shoe propped on his knee. He gestured for me to sit without looking at me, continuing his conversation. "Absolutely, Bob. We'll leverage that Q4 momentum and pivot hard. It's a paradigm shift. My team is all over it. Okay, talk soon." He hung up and finally turned his attention to me, his face settling into a mask of benign paternalism. He glanced at the clock on his desk. "Alara, what's on your mind? You've got 10 minutes. My carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I took a deep breath, placing my meticulously prepared portfolio on the polished surface of his desk. "Marcus," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "Thank you for meeting with me. I've requested this time to discuss my compensation and my role within the company." He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. He didn't look at the portfolio. His eyes were fixed on my face, with an expression that was not curious, but faintly bored, as if I were a television program he was not particularly interested in watching. "Go on," he said. I found my footing. I talked him through my performance over the last few years. I reminded him of specific projects where my analysis had been pivotal. I spoke about the increasing complexity of my work, the new skills I had acquired. And then I came to Project Nightingale. "As you know," I said, trying to keep any trace of accusation out of my voice, "the logistical overhaul from Project Nightingale, which I led, is projected to save the company over $1 million in its first year. Based on this and my consistent high performance, as well as market research for my role, I am requesting a salary adjustment." I slid the portfolio a few inches closer to him. "I've outlined all the details in this document." He still didn't touch it. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who held all the cards and enjoyed the fact that you knew it. "A raise," he said, drawing the word out as if tasting it. "That's what this is about. It's about fair compensation for the value I bring to the company," I corrected gently. He chuckled. It was not a pleasant sound. It was a short, sharp bark that echoed slightly in the large office. He finally leaned back in his chair, picking up a heavy, silver pen and tapping it rhythmically on his desk. Tap, tap, tap. The sound drilled into my skull. "Alara," he said, his voice dropping into a confidential man-to-man tone that was infinitely more condescending than his booming pronouncements. "Let me be frank with you. You're a good worker. You're reliable. You do what you're told. You produce detailed work. Very detailed." He gestured vaguely toward the portfolio, as if its thoroughness were a character flaw. "But a raise of the magnitude you're likely thinking of? That's for leaders. That's for people who drive the business forward. People with vision. People who can see the big picture." My mouth went dry. The big picture for Project Nightingale was a $1.2 million savings, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I believed that drove the business forward. The tapping stopped. He leaned forward again, the smile gone, replaced by a look of profound, almost weary disappointment. It was the look of a parent about to explain a harsh truth to a simple-minded child. "You're not understanding," he said slowly, as if I were hard of hearing. "You see, you're a number cruncher, Alara. A very good one, I'll grant you. You can follow the breadcrumbs. But someone has to lay the trail. Someone has to sell the vision to the board. Someone has to take that raw data of yours," he said the word data like it was something unpleasant he'd stepped in, "and turn it into a strategy. That's what I do. That's leadership." The air in the room felt thick and heavy. I could feel the blood draining from my face. Every word was a carefully aimed dart, designed to diminish, to trivialize, to reduce my work to a mere clerical function. "So," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "you don't believe my work merits a significant raise?" He sighed, a theatrical exhalation of impatience. He looked me straight in the eye, and then he delivered the line that would burn itself into my memory, the line that would become the fuel for a fire I didn't yet know I was capable of building. "Alara," he said, his voice flat and final, devoid of any feigned kindness, "it's not a matter of merit. It's a matter of what you are. And you're a support function. A very good one. But that's all. To be blunt." He paused for effect, letting the silence hang between us, heavy and suffocating. "You don't deserve it. You don't deserve it." The 4 words landed not like a sound but like a physical impact. They seemed to suck all the air out of the room, out of my lungs. I felt a strange, cold numbness spread through me. It was so direct, so utterly dismissive that my mind struggled to process it. I had prepared for a negotiation. I had prepared for a no. I had prepared for, "It's not in the budget right now." I had not prepared for a fundamental negation of my worth. I just stared at him. My meticulously prepared portfolio sat on his desk between us, untouched, a testament to a value he refused to see. He saw the look on my face and clearly misinterpreted it as simple defeat. He adopted his paternalistic tone again. "Look, don't take it the wrong way. Keep doing what you're doing. You're a valuable cog in the machine. Just know your place in it. Okay." He glanced at his clock again, a clear dismissal. "My next meeting is in 2 minutes. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember picking up my portfolio. I vaguely recall nodding, a jerky mechanical motion that had no thought behind it. The next thing I knew, I was walking back down the hallway. The fluorescent light seemed unbearably bright, the low hum of the office deafeningly loud. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on my back, their curiosity a palpable force. They knew why I'd gone in there. My face must have told them the outcome. I sat down at my desk. My screensaver was a flowing, abstract pattern of colored lights, a visual representation of a data flow model I had built for fun. It looked alien to me now, meaningless. I stared at it, seeing nothing. The numbness began to recede, and in its place, a strange and terrible clarity began to dawn. It wasn't the hot flash fire of anger. It was something colder, deeper. It was the chilling realization that my belief system that hard work and competence would be rewarded was a fairy tale. At least it was in this kingdom ruled by this king. Marcus hadn't just denied my request. He had denied my reality. He had looked at my masterpiece, a project that required intellect, creativity, and relentless dedication, and called it raw data. He had looked at the person who created it and called her a cog. He hadn't just said no to more money. He had passed a judgment on my very essence in this professional context. "You don't deserve it." I sat there for a long time, the portfolio lying on my desk like a dead thing. The shame was a physical sensation, a hot flush that crept up my neck. The humiliation felt like a heavy cloak. But beneath the shame, beneath the hurt, a tiny cold ember began to glow. It wasn't rage. It was resolve. He had defined me. He had put me in a box labeled support function. He had told me my place. And in that moment, sitting at my beige desk under the hum of the fluorescent lights, I made a quiet, solemn promise to myself. I would not burn his kingdom down. I would take it from him. The weeks that followed that meeting were a study in duality. On the surface, I was the same Alara. I came to work on time. I completed my assignments. I was quiet, diligent, and professional. I continued to produce the high-quality, insightful work that was my signature. To Marcus and my colleagues, it probably looked like I had accepted my fate. A little quieter, perhaps. A little less engaged in the pointless morning pleasantries. But essentially the same. But inside, a revolution was taking place. The hurt and humiliation didn't just fade away. They transmuted. They cooled and hardened into something else. A tool. I started to see my job, the office, and Marcus himself, not as my reality, but as a data set to be analyzed. My new secret project had begun. I called it Project Reckoning. My first step was observation. I stopped seeing Marcus as my boss, a figure of authority, and started seeing him as a system with flaws and vulnerabilities. I watched him in meetings. I saw how he never had a pen, how he never took notes. I saw how his eyes would wander when technical details were being discussed, only to snap back into focus when it was his turn to speak, at which point he would regurgitate a half-understood summary with immense confidence. I realized his entire persona was a bluff. I created a new private file on my personal laptop, a place that was firewalled and encrypted. I called it the Shadow Ledger. In it, I began to document everything. Started with my own work. For every project I completed, I logged the hours I spent, the specific skills I used, and the outcome. Then, I began to log Marcus's involvement. Or rather, his lack of it. Project Titan Marketing Campaign Analysis. My contribution. 85 hours, developed new predictive model for customer engagement. Identified 15% budget inefficiency. Marcus's contribution. Forwarded my final report to the VP of Marketing with the subject line, "Here's that analysis I promised you." Q3 financial projections. My contribution. 60 hours, reconciled conflicting data from sales and operations, built a more accurate forecasting model. Marcus's contribution. Presented my key findings slide for 3 minutes at the board meeting. The Shadow Ledger grew day by day. It was a cold, factual account of the value I created and the credit he stole. But it wasn't just about me. I started noticing his effect on the whole department. He was a bottleneck. He would sit on requests for days, only to approve them in a flurry of emails at 5 p.m. on a Friday. He would change project priorities on a whim, based on who he'd last spoken to, causing chaos and wasted work for the entire team. He fostered a culture of quiet resentment. I documented it all, not with emotion or accusation but with dates, times, and impact statements. I was building a case, though I didn't yet know who the judge and jury would be. I was simply gathering the evidence. My colleague Sarah, who sat in the cubicle next to mine, noticed the change in me, though she couldn't put her finger on it. Sarah was kind, competent, and perpetually overworked. She had a family and a mortgage and lived in a state of low-grade anxiety about pleasing Marcus. One afternoon, she leaned over the low cubicle wall, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "How did the meeting go? The one you had a few weeks ago?" I looked up from my screen. "He said no," I said, my voice neutral. Her face fell in sympathy. "Oh, Alara, I'm so sorry. After all the work you did on Nightingale. That's criminal." Did he give a reason? I considered telling her the truth. I considered sharing the 4 little words that had become my new North Star. But I didn't. To speak them aloud would be to give them power, to make them a story of victimhood. And I was no longer the victim. I was the analyst. "He said it wasn't in the budget," I lied, offering her a small, tight smile. "The usual." She nodded, accepting the familiar corporate excuse. "Of course. Never in the budget for the people who actually do the work." Meanwhile, I bet his bonus could buy a new car. She sighed and went back to her own spreadsheet. Her comment lodged in my mind. His bonus. His performance reviews. They were based on the perceived success of his department. A perception that was built entirely on the work of people like Sarah and me. A perception I was now silently, meticulously deconstructing in my shadow ledger. The second phase of Project Reckoning was self-improvement. My no from Marcus was not just about money. It was about his definition of me as a support function. He believed I lacked leadership. Fine. I would acquire it. I used the money I would have spent on myself had I gotten the raise, and I enrolled in an online executive leadership and management course from a prestigious university. The classes were at night. I would come home from a full day of being a cog, make a quick dinner, and then log into a world of case studies on corporate strategy, organizational behavior, and effective leadership. It was fascinating. I was learning the language of the people upstairs. I was learning about financial statements, stakeholder management, and strategic planning. The concepts weren't difficult. They were just another system, another data set to be understood. I excelled. My professors, real-world executives, and business leaders praised my analytical approach to leadership challenges. One of them, a retired COO named Dr. Alastair Finch, took a particular interest in me. He saw my ability to cut through the noise and identify the core issue in a complex case study. "You have a CEO's mind, Alara," he wrote in a feedback note. "You don't just see the pieces, you see the whole board." His words were a balm on the wound of Marcus's dismissal. Someone saw it. Someone outside the toxic bubble of Sterling Hayes saw my potential. It strengthened my resolve. While I was studying at night, by day I was applying my new knowledge. I started thinking beyond my own tasks. I saw the inefficiencies in our departmental workflow not as annoyances, but as solvable problems. I quietly created a new project management template and shared it with Sarah, framing it as just a little something to help us keep track of things. She loved it. It saved her hours of work. Soon other team members asked for it. Within a month, the entire department, except for Marcus, was unofficially using my system because it was simply better. It made our work more efficient and transparent. Marcus never even noticed. He was too busy in synergy meetings to pay attention to the actual mechanics of his own department. I was building influence without authority. I was becoming the de facto operational leader of the team, the person people came to with real problems, while Marcus remained the titular head, the face of the department. It was a strange silent coup. And then, about 4 months after my fateful meeting, the first rumors began to circulate. They started, as they always do, at the coffee machine and in the hushed conversations by the water cooler. The words were whispered: acquisition, merger. The name that came up was Ethelred Global. Ethelred was a giant. They were a multinational tech conglomerate known for their aggressive growth strategy and, more importantly, for their ruthless efficiency. They didn't just acquire companies, they absorbed them, stripping them down to their most valuable parts and discarding the rest. When Ethelred bought a company, redundancy was not tolerated. The news sent a ripple of anxiety through the office. Everyone was polishing their resumes, trying to look busy and indispensable. Everyone except Marcus. Marcus was ecstatic. He saw the acquisition not as a threat, but as an opportunity. He strutted around the office, his chest puffed out. "This is fantastic news," he announced in a team meeting, his voice booming with false confidence. "Ethelred is a major league player. This is our chance to get onto a bigger stage. They're going to need strong leaders who know the lay of the land to manage the transition. This is a huge opportunity for our department." He looked around the room, making eye contact with each of us, a king assuring his court that their futures were secure under his benevolent rule. What he meant was that it was a huge opportunity for him. I watched him, and for the first time I felt a flicker of something that resembled pity. He was so blinded by his own arrogance, he couldn't see the iceberg dead ahead. He thought his bluster and his C-suite jargon would impress a company like Ethelred. I, who had spent the last few months studying corporate strategy, knew better. Ethelred wasn't interested in storytellers. They were interested in data. They were interested in performance, in efficiency, in quantifiable value. And all the real data, all the real value, was currently sitting in a password-protected file on my personal laptop. The official announcement came a week later. It was an all-hands meeting in the main cafeteria. The CEO of Sterling Hayes, a man who always looked slightly tired, gave a canned speech about synergies and a bright new future. Then he introduced the woman who would be leading the integration process for Ethelred Global. Her name was Evelyn Sterling. She walked onto the small stage, and the entire atmosphere in the room shifted. She was in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair cut in a severe, elegant bob. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored black dress. There was no artifice about her. She exuded an aura of calm, unshakable authority. She didn't boom or strut. She didn't need to. Her power was quiet, and all the more potent for it. She spoke for only 5 minutes. Her voice was calm, clear, and direct. "Good morning," she began. "I am Evelyn Sterling, Executive Vice President of Strategy at Ethelred Global. Over the next 3 months, my team and I will be conducting a deep operational review of Sterling Hayes. Our goal is simple: to understand this business. We want to identify its strengths, its weaknesses, its core assets, and its inefficiencies. We are not here to simply slash and burn. We are here to build something stronger, more efficient, and more profitable. To do that, we need to understand the truth of this organization. My team and I will be meeting with every department head, and we will also be speaking directly to the people on the ground. We value data and we value truth. Thank you for your cooperation." She finished, gave a slight nod, and walked off the stage. A nervous silence hung in the air, followed by a ripple of anxious chatter. Marcus, of course, saw his opening. He immediately made his way through the crowd, heading straight for Evelyn Sterling, his hand outstretched, a broad salesman's smile plastered on his face. "Ms. Sterling. Marcus Thorne, Director of Analytics. A huge welcome. My team and I are incredibly excited about the synergies here. I have some top-level insights I'd love to share with you when you have a moment." From across the room, I watched the interaction. I saw Evelyn Sterling take his hand, her expression unreadable. She was polite but cool. She listened to him for a moment, her eyes scanning his face with an unnerving intensity. I knew, with the certainty of a well-tested hypothesis, that she saw right through him. She saw the cheap suit, the over-rehearsed lines, the hollow confidence. She was an apex predator, and he was putting on a loud, clumsy display that only served to highlight what an easy meal he would be. She said something brief to him, handed him off to a junior associate on her team, and moved on. Marcus was left standing there, his smile faltering for just a second before he recovered his composure. I didn't try to approach her. My time would come. I knew that the integration team would eventually make their way to our department. They would want to see the data, and I was the one who had it. All of it. Project Reckoning was about to enter its final phase. The Ethelred integration team descended upon Sterling Hayes like a quiet, efficient storm. They set up a war room in a large, empty conference area, and from there, they began their methodical dissection of the company. They were ghosts in the hallways, speaking in low tones, their laptops always open, their faces illuminated by the glow of spreadsheets and org charts. The office, already a place of low-grade anxiety, was now thick with the palpable tension. People spoke in whispers. Every meeting with the Ethelred team was followed by intense speculation. Marcus was in his element, or so he thought. He was constantly trying to get FaceTime with Evelyn Sterling and her senior deputies. He would forward them emails with grand titles like Strategic Overview of Analytics Department's Core Competencies, which were, of course, just repackaged versions of my work. He would try to casually bump into them in the hallway, ready with the well-rehearsed elevator pitch about his leadership and vision. They were polite, professional, and utterly impenetrable. They would thank him for the information and say, "We'll be in touch." He interpreted this as a sign of his growing importance in the new order. I interpreted it as them putting him in a holding pattern while they did their real research. About 2 weeks into the process, I received a calendar invitation. It was from a man named David Chuan, a senior analyst on Evelyn Sterling's team. The subject was Analytics Department Technical Deep Dive. The invitation was for me, Sarah, and 2 other senior analysts on our team. Marcus was not on the invitation list. I saw the invitation pop up on Sarah's screen at the same time it appeared on mine. She swiveled in her chair, her eyes wide. "Did you see this? Why isn't Marcus on it?" They probably want to talk to the people who actually do the work, I said, my voice calm, though my heart was beating a little faster. It's a technical deep dive. Marcus doesn't do technical. This was it. The moment I had been preparing for. The meeting was held in a small sterile conference room that the integration team had commandeered. David Chun was a young, incredibly sharp man in his early 30s. He wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to the Sterling Hayes suit and tie culture. He wasted no time on pleasantries. "Thank you for coming," he said, opening his laptop. "As you know, we're trying to get a clear picture of this department's functions and capabilities. I'm not interested in the high-level summary. I've already read all of Mr. Thorne's presentations. I want to get under the hood. I want to see your workflows, your models, your raw output. Walk me through your most complex recent project." My colleagues looked at each other nervously. They were used to having Marcus as a buffer, a translator. They weren't used to presenting their own raw work to outsiders. I took a breath. "I can start," I said. "I can walk you through Project Nightingale." For the next hour, I didn't just present the findings of Project Nightingale. I took him on a guided tour of its creation. I opened the files. I showed him the raw data sets, the lines of code I had written for the simulation, the different iterations of the model. I explained the statistical principles behind my choices. I didn't use jargon or buzzwords. I spoke his language, the language of pure, unadulterated data. David Chun was silent for most of it, his eyes darting between my screen and my face. He interrupted me only to ask sharp, insightful questions. "Why did you use a random forest model here instead of a gradient boosting machine? What was your data cleaning protocol for this unstructured data set?" They were questions Marcus wouldn't have even understood, let alone been able to answer. I answered each one calmly and thoroughly. When I was finished, the small room was quiet. Sarah and my other colleagues were staring at me with a new kind of respect. They had known I was good, but they hadn't understood the depth of my work. David Chun closed his laptop. He looked at me, and for the first time, his professional mask slipped, revealing a flicker of genuine admiration. "That," he said slowly, "was one of the most elegant and impactful pieces of internal data analysis I have ever seen. The $1.2 million saving is not an estimate, Ms. Vance. Based on my own quick look at the logistics numbers, I'd say it's conservative." He then turned to my colleagues and spent the next hour asking them about their work, their processes, and their frustrations. They opened up. They talked about the workflow inefficiencies, the last-minute changes in direction, the lack of clear strategy. They never mentioned Marcus by name, but they didn't have to. They were describing the symptoms of his leadership. I stayed silent, letting their experiences speak for themselves. The shadow ledger was coming to life. As the meeting wrapped up, David Chun looked at me. "Ms. Vance, Evelyn Sterling will want to see this. All of this. Be prepared for a follow-up meeting." The next day, Marcus was fuming. He had clearly heard that we had met with the integration team without him. He called me into his office. The paternalism was gone, replaced with a barely concealed fury. "What, exactly, did you discuss with David Chun yesterday?" he demanded, his hands flat on his desk as he leaned toward me. "He asked for a technical deep dive of the department's work," I said calmly, meeting his gaze. "So we gave him one." I walked him through the methodology of Project Nightingale. His face darkened. "You are not to have meetings with the Ethelred team without my presence. Is that understood? All communication goes through me. I am the director of this department. I am the single point of contact. You are overstepping, Alara." "It was their invitation, Marcus," I said, my voice still even. "They specifically requested to speak with the analysts. If you have an issue with that, I suggest you take it up with them." He was momentarily stunned by my directness. It was the first time I had ever pushed back against him so openly. He sputtered for a moment, then fell back on his usual tactics. "You don't understand the politics here, Alara," he sneered. "You're being naive. You think these people are your friends? They are looking for ways to cut costs. And you just showed them how the work gets done without any need for senior leadership." You're not just jeopardizing my position. You're jeopardizing the whole department. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. He was accusing me of the very thing he was guilty of, thinking only of himself. I simply presented the facts of my work, I said, my voice like ice. That's my job. If there's nothing else, I have a deadline. I turned and walked out of his office, leaving him standing there, his face a mask of impotent rage. The power dynamic between us had irrevocably shifted. He knew it and I knew it. A week later, the expected invitation arrived. This one was from Evelyn Sterling herself. The subject was simple. Follow-up, Project Nightingale. The attendees were me, David Chan, and Evelyn. No one else. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but it was cold, not hot. This was the final exam. I entered the large conference room they had been using as their war room. It was stark and functional. Whiteboards covered in complex diagrams and notes. Laptops and stacks of financial reports littered the long table. Evelyn Sterling sat at the head of the table, David Chan at her side. She gestured for me to sit opposite them. "Ms. Vance," she began, her voice as calm and direct as it had been on the stage. "David has walked me through your work on the logistics project. He was impressed. That is not a word my team uses lightly." "Thank you," I said simply. "He also tells me," she continued, her sharp eyes fixed on me, "that you single-handedly conceived, designed, and executed this project, which is now saving this company over $1 million a year." "I had the support of my team in the data gathering phase," I said, making sure to acknowledge my colleagues. "But yes, the analysis and the model were my own." She nodded slowly. "And your compensation for this remarkable achievement?" The question hung in the air. This was the moment of truth. My heart hammered in my chest, but my voice when I spoke was steady. I decided to tell the unvarnished truth. "I asked for a raise following the completion of the project," I said. "It was denied." Evelyn's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. "On what grounds?" I took a breath. I was told that I was a support function, a good cog in the machine, and that, specifically, I didn't deserve it. I said the words without emotion, stating them as a simple fact, another data point in the system. The silence that followed was profound. David Chan looked down at his notes, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Evelyn Sterling leaned forward slightly. "Who told you that?" "My director, Marcus Thorne," I replied. She held my gaze for a long moment, and in that look I felt a sense of being truly seen, truly understood, for the first time in my professional life. She wasn't just seeing the analyst. She was seeing the strategist, the leader, the person who had endured and persevered. "Ms. Vance," she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, "Ethelred Global did not become what it is by rewarding charismatic storytellers and punishing quiet competence. We did not become what it is by valuing perception over performance. We value one thing above all else: results. The problem with a company like Sterling Hayes is that over time, the wires get crossed. The people who talk about the work get rewarded more than the people who do the work. My job is to uncross those wires." She stood up and walked over to one of the large whiteboards. It was covered in a complex, hand-drawn diagram of the current Sterling Hayes org chart. There were boxes and lines everywhere. Marcus's name was in a box labeled Director of Analytics. She picked up a black dry erase marker. "We're redesigning the structure of several departments to align with Ethelred's operational philosophy. We need leaders who understand the data from the ground up. Leaders who can not only analyze but also strategize and execute. Leaders who can build and manage a high-performing team based on merit, not politics." She looked directly at me. "David has not only shown me your work, but he has also shared the workflow systems and templates you developed for your team. The ones your director seems to be unaware of." My quiet coup had not been so quiet after all. David Chan hadn't just looked at the data. He had analyzed the team's behavior. Evelyn Sterling turned back to the whiteboard. With a single decisive motion, she drew a large X through the box that held Marcus Thorne's name. Then she drew a new box above it, a box that would oversee not just the old analytics team, but also a new, expanded data strategy division. She uncapped the marker again, and in clear, bold letters, she wrote my name inside the new box. Alara Vance, Director, Data Strategy and Analytics. She turned back to me, her expression serious. The position comes with a 40% salary increase over your current rate, a significant performance bonus structure, and stock options. It also comes with the authority to restructure your department as you see fit, including making any necessary staffing decisions. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The question, Ms. Vance, is not whether you deserve it. We already know the answer to that. The question is, do you want it? I looked at my name on the whiteboard. I looked at the X through Marcus's name. The cold ember that had been glowing inside me for months finally ignited, not into a fire of rage, but into a clean, bright flame of vindication. Yes, I said, my voice clear and strong. Yes, I do. The announcement was scheduled for the following Monday, in a mandatory meeting for the entire analytics department. The intervening days were a blur of confidential meetings with Evelyn, David, and Ethelred's HR team. We finalized the details of my new role, discussed my vision for the department, and mapped out a transition plan. I felt a sense of surreal calm, like I was the eye of my own personal hurricane. I told no one. I went about my work as usual. Marcus, blissfully unaware of the guillotine poised above his neck, had returned to his preening, self-important self. He seemed to have forgotten our last confrontation, treating me once again with his usual condescending paternalism. On Friday afternoon he stopped by my desk. "Alara," he said, puffing out his chest. "Just wanted to give you a heads up. The Ethelred team are making some structural announcements next week. I've been in talks with them and it's looking very positive. We're going to be a key part of the new company. Big things are coming." He winked, as if letting me in on a glorious secret. "Stick with me and you'll be fine." I just looked at him and nodded slowly. "Thank you for the heads up, Marcus. I'll keep that in mind." The sheer, unadulterated irony was a taste I was beginning to enjoy. Monday morning arrived, gray and rainy. The mood in the office was electric with nervous energy. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. in our main conference room. We all filed in and took our seats. Marcus, naturally, positioned himself at the front of the room, ready to be recognized by the new management. He gave me a magnanimous nod as I found a seat in the middle of the pack. Evelyn Sterling entered the room, flanked by David Chun. She wasted no time. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her calm voice cutting through the nervous chatter. "As part of the ongoing integration, we have finalized the new leadership structure for several key divisions. Today, we are announcing the future of the analytics department." A collective breath was held. I could see Marcus straighten his tie, a small, expectant smile on his face. "Effective immediately," Evelyn continued, "we are expanding the scope of this department to include data strategy and business intelligence, creating a new, unified division. This division will be central to Ethelred's strategy moving forward." She paused and her eyes scanned the room. They passed over Marcus without a flicker of recognition and landed on me. "I am pleased to announce that the new Director of Data Strategy and Analytics will be Alara Vance." The silence in the room was absolute. It was so complete, so profound that I could hear the faint hum of the projector. It was a silence made of pure, unadulterated shock. I watched as every head in the room slowly turned towards me. Sarah's jaw was on the floor, her eyes wide with disbelief and then dawning brilliant joy. My other colleagues had similar expressions of stunned astonishment. But the only reaction I was truly interested in was Marcus's. I watched him. It was like watching a statue crack in slow motion. The expectant smile on his face froze, then curdled. His confident posture sagged. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty grayish pallor. His eyes, wide with confusion, darted from Evelyn to me and back again, as if he was trying to solve an impossible equation. He opened his mouth slightly, but no sound came out. It was the face of a man whose reality had been shattered in a single sentence. The man who had built his career on perception had just been annihilated by a fact. Evelyn wasn't finished. Alara has consistently demonstrated not only exceptional technical skill, but also the strategic vision and leadership potential that we value at Ethelred. We are confident that she will build a world-class team. She then looked directly at Marcus. Her voice was not cruel, but it was cold and personal and utterly final. Marcus Thorne will be assisting Alara with the transition over the coming weeks. His new role and responsibilities will be determined by her, in line with the department's new strategic direction. She had not only deposed him, she had just made him my subordinate. It was an elegant, brutal, and perfectly corporate execution. "Alara," Evelyn said, gesturing for me to come to the front of the room. "Would you like to say a few words?" I walked to the front, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I stood where Marcus had stood just moments before. I looked out at the faces of my colleagues, and then my eyes met his. The confusion in his expression had now morphed into a toxic brew of fury, humiliation, and sheer pathetic disbelief. He looked like a man who had just been told the sky was green. "Thank you, Evelyn," I began, my voice clear and even. "I'm honored to have this opportunity. I know this team has an incredible amount of talent, and I am excited to work with all of you to build something truly special. My door will always be open. We have a lot of work to do, but I know we can achieve great things together." I kept it short, simple, and professional. I didn't need to gloat. The situation spoke for itself. The meeting ended. My colleagues swarmed me, their voices a babble of congratulations and questions. Sarah hugged me, whispering, "Oh my God, Alara. This is the best day ever." Through the crowd I watched Marcus. He didn't move. He just stood there, rooted to the spot as people filed past him, some giving him furtive, pitying glances. He was a ghost at his own funeral. Finally he seemed to reboot. He turned, his movements stiff and robotic, and walked out of the room. The rest of the day was spent in a flurry of activity. I was moved into a new office. It was a large corner office with a view of the city. It was Marcus's office. The facilities team packed his personal effects, the framed handshakes, the sandalwood-scented air freshener, the ridiculous putting green into a cardboard box. As they carried it out, I was left with the room itself. The heavy mahogany desk, the high-backed leather chair, the symbols of power he had used to intimidate me. They were just objects. They had no power of their own. My first official act as director was to schedule a one-on-one meeting. It was with Marcus Thorne. I sent the invitation from my new email account. The meeting was for the following morning at 9 a.m. in my office. The next morning I arrived early. I had a cup of tea and watched the sun rise over the city. When I had sat on the other side of this desk, I had been terrified. Now I just felt a sense of profound, quiet calm. The universe had been set right. At exactly 9 a.m., there was a hesitant knock on my door. "Come in," I said. Marcus entered. He looked terrible. He hadn't slept. His suit, usually so sharp, looked rumpled. His face was a mess of conflicting emotions. He couldn't bring himself to look me in the eye. He stood awkwardly in the middle of the room. "Sit down, Marcus," I said, my voice gentle but firm. I gestured to the chair he had once made me sit in, the visitor's chair. He sat, perching on the edge of the seat like a nervous bird. I looked at him across the vast expanse of the mahogany desk. I had imagined this moment so many times. I had imagined yelling. I had imagined listing his every sin. I had imagined firing him on the spot. But now that it was here, I felt none of that. I felt only the cool, calm clarity of a business leader making a strategic decision. Anger was a waste of energy. The most satisfying revenge was not emotional. It was professional. "Marcus," I began, my voice perfectly level. "As you know, the department is moving in a new strategic direction. My primary goal is to maximize efficiency, foster innovation, and build a culture of accountability and data-driven results." I was using his language, the corporate jargon he loved so much, but I was infusing it with real meaning. I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew what I was doing. "To that end," I continued, "I am restructuring the team's roles and responsibilities. I've been reviewing the department's historical performance, and I've identified several areas that require significant improvement. I slid a single sheet of paper across the desk towards him. It was a list of tasks. Your new role for the transition period will be to handle the projects on this list. I need a full audit of all our software licenses, a reconciliation of the last 3 years of departmental expense reports, and a deep dive analysis of our data storage inefficiencies. I watched his face as he read the list. These were the tasks he had always considered beneath him. The tedious, thankless housekeeping jobs he would palm off on junior analysts. It was the work of a support function. It was the work of a cog in the machine. His head snapped up, a spark of his old arrogance flaring. This is junior-level work, Alara. I am a director. You were a director, Marcus. I corrected him gently. Your current title is senior analyst, pending a full performance review. And this is the work I require to be done. I expect a full progress report on my desk by Friday. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a look of sheer, pathetic desperation. Why are you doing this? He whispered, his voice cracking. I leaned forward slightly, my expression unreadable. I thought about all the late nights, the stolen credit, the condescension. I thought about the 6 months I poured my soul into Project Nightingale. I thought about the cold, dead finality in his voice as he had uttered those 4 words. I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine, wrapped in the unimpeachable language of corporate management. Marcus, I said, my voice quiet and calm. Let's be blunt. 4 years, this department's performance has been misaligned with its stated potential. My job is to correct that. I need people in roles where they can provide the maximum value. Based on my analysis of your historical contributions and skill set, this is the role where you currently fit best. It's not personal. It's about optimizing our assets. He stared at me, his eyes pleading. He was finally seeing me, not as the quiet analyst in the corner, but as the person who now held his entire professional fate in her hands. Please, he said. The word was a surrender. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. I gave him a small neutral smile. A boss's smile. Keep doing what you're doing, Marcus, I said, my voice soft as silk. You're a valuable cog in the machine. Just know your place in it. Okay. He flinched as if I had struck him. His own words delivered back to him with chilling precision. He understood then. He understood everything. He didn't last the 2 weeks of the transition. He submitted his resignation 4 days later, citing personal reasons. He cleaned out his desk when most people were at lunch, slipping out of the building without a word to anyone. He was just gone, a ghost erased from the system. I went on to rebuild the department from the ground up. I promoted Sarah to be my deputy. I hired bright, talented people and created a culture of collaboration and respect. We became the most effective, most respected division in the new Ethelred structure. My work was my own. My success was my own. Sometimes, late at night, sitting in my corner office, I look out at the city lights and I think about Marcus. I don't feel anger anymore. I don't even feel pity. I feel a kind of detached gratitude. He gave me a gift that day. He held up a mirror and told me I was small. And in doing so, he forced me to look closer, to see the truth of my own strength, and to finally, utterly demolish the reflection he tried to create for me. He told me I didn't deserve it. But he was wrong. I did. I had earned it. And in the end I took it. The world is full of people like Marcus Thorne, people who build their castles on the foundations of other people's labor, and who define the worth of others to inflate their own. They hand down judgments from on high, never expecting to be judged themselves. My story had a satisfying conclusion, but I know that for many, the story is still ongoing. So I leave you with this question. Have you ever had someone in a position of power try to define your worth for you? What did you do? Did you accept their definition? Or did you find a way to write your own? Share your stories, your thoughts, and your own arcs of revenge in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and your voice deserves to be heard. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribing to her revenge arc for more stories of quiet, calculated, and ultimately satisfying justice. Until next time, be the author of your own story.